Good morning. Welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast. I am your host with co-host Joe Haytas and special co-host Michael Gawlik. We are going to talk about documents, presenting documents with power. And I think it's enhancing suitability, using the documents to help you support suitability. And this is an important chapter and an important thing for your parole hearings, because your loved one's parole hearings, because a lot of the times the commissioners in general, if you're a programming inmate with a GED and self-help programs, and you're fairly cognitively functioning at a higher level, they expect documents. What kind of documents? In general, they are primarily looking for relapse prevention plans. If you don't have relapse prevention plans, things get a little trickier at the parole hearing. Not necessarily going to get your loved one denied parole, but it's just a great idea to have them. What I always tell my clients, if you don't have them, they can deny you parole. If you do have them, they don't really care. They just want to talk to you about your testimony. So it's just kind of one of those things. Why not just have them? The other thing about preparing documents is it shows that panel the weekend before when they're probably prepping your file, or the week before when they're probably prepping your file, that this is a person that's doing the work, trying to do the work, putting an effort in, and they can kind of see where you're at then with these documents. And then number one. Number two, I would just jump in and add, I always like a letter of apology. Why do I tell my clients that letters of apology are really important rather than just relying on your testimony? Because again, it showcases a lot of your programming. What does it showcase? It showcases accountability. Okay. It showcases that you've done denial management. It showcases victim impact. It showcases your step 8 work, your step 9 work. All right. Your step 5 work. It's just a really good example, a quick example for the panel again, that weekend before, that week before, to say, this guy is, or gal is, making some efforts here. They're really understanding. Not that they're not going to ask you those questions, but they can at least get that preliminary view of you. And when they're making those tentative decisions, they are making tentative decisions. Believe you me, I feel like the majority are making a tentative ruling in their mind, okay, which they're allowed to do. In general, they can't make the decision, but they have made a tentative decision about where they think you are in life. And then written parole plans, supposedly we've gotten away from them, but I really don't advise not having written parole plans. I would still submit a written parole plan. Again, if you're a high functioning, cognitively high functioning, you should really have your parole plans. What do you plan to do? Are you just planning to just kind of wing it, and just do whatever the parole agent tells you to do? I just think that's a recipe for disaster. What are your professional services? How are you planning to maintain sobriety? And sobriety, when I use sobriety, I don't just say alcohol and drugs. We mean emotional sobriety. How are you going to manage all of your triggers, okay, in the community? Because the relapse prevention plan, it's great, but if you don't keep going, you won't use it anyway if you don't continue going to 12-step programs. And there's a 12-step program for almost anything you can think about. So there's no excuse not to be going to 12-step programs. And there is a 12-step program running on the hour, on the half hour, and sometimes on the quarter past and quarter till the hour. So there's no excuse not to be participating in a 12-step program. I get on my high horse on that every single show, but it's so important. And documents, documents, documents. What are the other documents? I say any book reports, because book reports, they always say you can, if the program wasn't available, read a book, do the book report. And then finally, I like to have my guys write out kind of their key core courses, the core self-helps that they've done that address specifically their risk factors. Risk factors being your crime was a burglary. Okay, criminal thinking is a risk factor. Your crime's a robbery. Okay, you've got a violence risk factor. Your crime's a rape. Okay, you've got a sexual offending risk factor. Okay, your crime's a, I'm missing something, but you get the message. So, and anything else, so domestic violence. So that's a risk factor for you.
Substance abuse.
Oh, the big, the one underlying everything. So
Yeah.
you need to have, I like to see, again, showcasing, because they can see the chrono, but why not showcase beforehand what you've learned? And that's a good way for you to showcase that without giving them an insight statement, which I think in general, they really don't want to read all of that. They really want to ask you about insight. So, and causative factors and character defects. I prefer testimony on that. But anyway, I've rambled on for a good 5 minutes, and I want to turn it over to Joe. It's his book, his chapter. Correct me on anything that I'm wrong about. Let me know what you do differently or you do the same and what I've missed.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. Well, my thoughts on the parole packet is I agree with what you said to include in it. I think the relapse prevention plan is extremely important, and not only to have it in there, but to know it, that they can ask you questions about whatever your triggers, your stressors, your coping skills, and you know it, and it's pretty much in there so that they can ask you questions off of it, but you have to show that you've internalized the things that you have in there. And it's also very important to have some plans in there for continuing programming and for having a support group. So that's number one. Now, the problem with some, not all, are, besides asking me if they can read their documents during the hearing, is sometimes, and this is understanding if you put yourself in the shoes of an incarcerated person, but they want every last chrono and certificate in there. And I tell them over and over again, were they in your C-file when you did your C-file review? Or are you going to check when you do your C-file review? And nevertheless, most, not all, but most give me a ton of chronos, and then I go back and I see, most of them, maybe not all of them, but most of them are like somewhere in the C-file, in the master file, or in the 10-day file. So, and I know that's
and just to jump in just a little bit on that too, I get that too. I'm right there with you. However, sometimes the central file, it's hard for them to navigate. They don't find them, and or some reason bits that we don't have access to, they don't have access to either. So they're at a little bit of a disadvantage. So just as an abundance of caution, I think they do send it, but if it has a CDCR logo on the chrono, they have it. Just assume they have it.
Yeah, but they don't have the ones like correspondence courses. If they took prep or Lighthouse 9 or whatever they took, they don't, they have, it's their responsibility to get it in so that the people in authority, obviously the commissioners, can make note of that. Yeah, a letter of remorse is also a good thing. Not just a good thing, but I mean, I think a letter of remorse and a victim impact statement are essential. You know, uh, I heard what you said about the insight statement, and that's yeah. I'm not gonna like think it's wrong if they have it, but I really don't encourage them to put that in there. But if they do, they do. Um, so what I think is
And on that
extreme.
point, Joe, a lot of times I feel like the reason I tell them not to
Mhm.
do it is because if I'm going to have a tricky little DA that's going to pick apart every word, or a tricky deputy commissioner that we're now not allowed to know who it is. But anyway, um, they, they just grab. I had a guy denied parole
Hmm.
because he said hurt instead of threaten to kill. He said threaten to hurt and not threaten to kill in his paperwork. Denied parole for that. I was so PO'd, trust me on that, but I never made that mistake. So I'm just extremely vigilant when I'm like, you know what? Let's just not give them anything. Let's give them what they really want, and you will be denied for, like a lack of relapse prevention plan, somewhat a letter of apology if it's missing. But man, let's not give them any chances to get weird and pick on you for something because you used a word 6 months ago that maybe you wouldn't have used today because of further programming. But again, sorry, Joe, you're just bringing up a lot of great points.
Yeah, well, not only that, but what you're saying, you can be damned if you do and damned if you don't. I mean, if you have some stuff that you want to get out, you want to be transparent. I say don't. Well, you are worried, but don't worry about what the DA is going to say. If it's part of your like something you learned in like denial management that you want to talk about, short of having any kind of legal repercussions, but I tend to, when it comes to that, I tend to think that it's better to have more than less. But I think your point though uh, has merit as well. It's just like, do I do this or I don't do that? It's like kind of a judgment call at the time.
It's a judgment call big time. And a lot of times, God bless Christina, because she's really smart and she's very got good instincts on what sounds good and what doesn't. So depending on the client, depending on what the board asked for last time, sometimes they say journal the heck out of this and write up an insight statement. If they said that, then it goes in. But she will oftentimes look and go, this isn't actually that bad. There's nothing there that, and she's, like I said, she's very sharp cookie. Or sometimes she'll say, you better look at this. And I'll look at it and go, oh boy, leave it out,
Mm,
you know, leave it out.
yeah.
Uh, Even if the client wants it in, sometimes I'll leave it out because it's really harmful.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
some of the stuff is like, whoa, no, we're not submitting that. But sometimes I'm stuck because you need to have a letter of apology. And if you don't have it, some of these commissioners want it, some not so worked up about it, but you just never know on the day, especially since the deputy commissioners are a lot of different deputy commissioners. And so you're like, oh no, this letter of apology is like I'll forgive a letter of apology that includes a remorse statement. And a remorse statement for me is the amends part, like what have you done to make it right? But like a living amends. I've gone to self-help and I've done that. I found that a lot of times I find it, I don't want to go there. I just wanted the letter of apology to be about the victim. But if they have included that, because a lot of people are taught to do that, and that's the only sample I have, even though they went against what my suggestion was to separate the two, I'll leave that. Okay, fine. That's fine, fine, fine. But if it's too much I in a letter of apology, I get kind of nervous about that too. And then, but if it's the only sample that I have for them to the rape victim, the primary rape victim, and there's no letter of apology, even though it's a terrible letter of apology, I got to put it in. So they're tricky. Like, this is a really good chapter, Joe. It's very important. It's a very nuanced thing as well. Keep going. I keep interrupting. You keep bringing up great stuff.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. You make some good points, but I think one of an opportunity to make your parole packet better, I think, is lost by many, just by simply putting a cover page, a table of contents, and it doesn't even have to be page for page, but and then that shows organization. And I would put front and center the things we've been discussing so far: a letter of remorse, your relapse prevention plans, and anything else that goes to what you've created for the packet. I think those should go up front and center, and then make the victim first. Those documents you've created about the victim, and then if you've done insight, then put that next, and then parole plans which are heavily on relapse prevention plans, that should go next, and then probably support letters after that, because that's part of parole plans. And then when they throw in all the chronos from Edovo and all the other ones that they've gotten recently, and sometimes they're the ones who haven't done much, they're trying to pull out all the stops, and they want the ones from like 2011 and the chronos from 2011 in there too, because they haven't done a whole lot in that area or whatever since then. So that's kind of the order, but definitely with a table of contents. And the table of contents doesn't have to be anything complex with, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just have, section A, victim impact. Section B, parole plans, whatever. Section F is going to be recent chronos or something. Now, putting that in, you just try not to duplicate material that's already in the C file, because I've been commented on that, like off the record, from commissioners, telling me like, that was too much stuff, or that makes more work for us. And even though they get paid the big bucks, you don't want to get them mad. So I tell people,
when they say that stuff to me, I do not care, because here's the thing.
Yeah.
We are not the boss of the show. The client is the boss. They're in control of what goes in and what goes out. That's the United States Supreme Court holding. And unless it's a very programming client, like somebody like Mr. Gawlik, I know that we're already a team. We know what's going on. I'm going to pull a document, and he's just going, he knows, because we've already have a pre-established relationship. But if I have a problematic client who's been nothing but a problem, narcissistic, or whatever the issues are going, whatever they send me is going in the file. And you don't like it, Commissioner, I don't care. I really don't care. You don't know. You have zero empathy for what we deal with difficult clients that send me all that stuff. So I'll look and I'll go, who is it? Christina, go look. He sent all these certificates. He ignored my advice not to do that, because I give them very specific instructions before the parole hearing as to what we're about to do with these documents, when you're going to send them, where you're going to send them, which is to me, and we're going to do that. And then they ignore me. I'll look at their file and I'll go, oh, okay, we turn to the risk assessment. Oh, high risk. We turn to the meeting. Client terminated the meeting early. I'll look to my history with that client. And if it's a problem, They want to be a problem and they just want to ignore the attorney's advice. Fine. They're the ultimate authority, period. And
Yeah.
I just do not have I don't have any room. If they want to go and run to Sacramento and go blah, 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 and call PJW because there's too many documents, context is everything. So don't feel bad, Joe.
No. It just goes with the territory, you know?
Goes with the territory.
Yeah.
I love all your comments, though. They're just, I don't know why I'm so fired up. Documents. I love the documents portion. It's so important. If you have great documents, man, you can make up for a few little things at the hearing that don't quite go right, but they can see this person has it together. They've done a lot of work. There's a body of work here. It's good work. They've put the effort, and then they can attribute maybe some stumbles at the hearing to the nervousness and the not being perfect and all of that. You're really going to get so much more leeway with a good document presentation, one that you've listened to the fucking lawyer and done what you're supposed to do. Because, I know Michael, he asked me every time, what do you think about doing this? Should I do that? I don't love that. I don't love this. And then, if he thought, he took what he needed and left the rest. We had very few disagreements because I'm respecting his decisions and his instincts. He's respecting mine. In the end, we put together a great, oh shit. I gotta go. I'll be here. You guys speak. I got piglet issues. Sorry about the swearing.
No worries.
Okay. Well, Michaal, you haven't,
I haven't said a word.
Yeah. And I know, as always, you always have good things to say, good quality comments.
Well, first and foremost, you guys are right. As long as there's something that's in your C file, you don't need to put it in the packet. It just takes up space.
Yeah.
And I'd rather the commissioners recognize that I valued their time and as such not bombarded them with stuff they already had. All right. So that's already a step in my favor because they already see that I'm respecting their time.
And just to jump in, another good, exactly. Very good point. And that is, if you're so worked up about it or worried that they don't have, just bring it.
Yeah.
Because you can always go, well, I don't see any domestic violence in here. Okay, here you go. Or if your primary thing is domestic violence, I don't mind putting those certificates in, maybe because you didn't see them or whatever. But all the other mindful kindness and Bible study, and not to diminish all that stuff. But if your crime is domestic violence, make sure they see, if you're going to do the certificate game, just put those ones in, or whatever. Sorry, keep going.
No. And that brings me to my next point, the certificate game. They see it for what it is. Okay. I myself averaged between 4 and 6 groups a year. That's what I could internalize. Any more than that, I'm just chasing paper. Everybody's a little different. Some people can internalize less. Some people can internalize a little more. But these guys, in my experience, and I've seen a lot of guys go to parole with, a packet 3 inches thick of just chronos and certificates in the last year. The board recognizes that they're just pushing paper. And then when they start asking questions about these various groups that they have all these certificates and chronos for, they get hung up on the answers. And guess what? Now they have a 3 or 5 year denial just for trying to BS their way through the board. So my biggest piece of advice here is don't try to get every chrono under the sun. That's not going to help you. Get what you need for your criminality, for your addiction, for your denial, for your victim impact. Focus on those factors. The Bible study and all that is great. It shows that you're having some personal and spiritual growth. Great. But you don't need 14 Bible study chronos in the last year in there to get that point across. And at that point, all they're seeing is, okay, he's just bombarding us with paper. So again, it comes back to respecting the time of the board and also respecting the fact that, they've been doing this a long time. They can recognize somebody trying to, and I'm going to use this word, manipulate the system
Mhm.
by bombarding them with chronos and paperwork. Use what you can internalize. Yeah, if you do 14, self-help classes in a year, which ones did you actually really benefit from? Let's focus on those. And then bring the others with you. And then they ask, well, okay, you did this stuff, but what else did you do? And you have something that you can really logically talk about in these other chronos. Go, yeah, I have a few more here that I did this past year. And if you would like to discuss them, here they are.
Mhm.
And, again, that goes back to showing that you're respecting the commissioners on an intellectual level, you're respecting their time, and you're respecting the process. You're not trying to manipulate. And Elizabeth said it well, we had very few issues where we bumped heads. I mean, there were a couple things I didn't agree with, couple things she didn't agree with, but usually we met in the middle somewhere. And, as Joe said, having a well-organized parole packet makes a lot of difference. I mean, mine was very well organized to start with, and then Elizabeth helped me fine-tune it quite a bit.
Mm.
And
His was really good. Plus, he had done that course. He created a curriculum and we put that in as well. But
yes,
he had
Very
a
good.
lot of documents, but they were all meaningful. There wasn't any extraneous stuff that was just in there for no reason, even though it was quite a large 10-day packet.
Wow.
and so let's get back to what you were talking about earlier with the apology letters. My first remorse letter, my first apology letter was more focused on the crime that I committed when I murdered a man. All right. And I mean, it was a good letter. It explained what needed to be explained at the time for the first commissioner, for the first time I went to board. It addressed my crime. It addressed the things that I affected on the victim and his family and the community. And that was great. But it was not the letter I used for the second packet. In my second letter, and the deputy commissioner I had, I mean, I don't know, he was awestruck with this letter. He just kept saying everybody should read this letter.
Mm.
And what I discussed were my letter to Craig. I discussed with him the things that I took from him and I denied him. And then I did the same thing with his family. I explained all the things that I denied them. And then I finished the letter sharing one of my fondest memories of Craig. And, this is how I want Craig remembered, not for being murdered brutally, but for the man he was. And, it wasn't, I didn't sit down with a formula and write that letter. I mean, there's all these formulas, all these outlines, and all this that, there comes a time where you have to write these letters from your heart.
Yeah.
And, let your victim and let your victim's family know, even if they never read it, it's there for them if they ever choose to.
Mhm.
But to let them know that you understand what your actions have caused and you can see the harm directly. And, in this case, I also pointed out the beauty of the man whose life I took from. And, my first letter I rewrote probably 5 or 6 times before I went to the board that time. This one I did one revision on, and it's what spoke to my heart, so I went with it. But I wasn't trying to be woe is Mike. Mike is the victim. here because he had all this abuse in his childhood and he was addicted to gambling. No, this had nothing to do with me as far as the things I went through in life. This has nothing to do with the guilt I feel. It has to do with what I took when I killed that man.
Mm.
And that's what I focused on. And
I think that's a really important distinction too, because you can still include remorse like living amends. I still tried not to do that because everybody morphs into, they like to slide in the victim story about I was a victim because I was the child of, and again, Michael did a fantastic job of just going, wasn't there, wasn't even in there. But again, you can still include, if you want to include the remorse aspects without, like he says, going into anything about my victim story. It's just always about the victim. And if I do include that living amends about, I took a class about domestic violence and learned that domestic violence does this and this and this, back, then turning it right back to the victims again.
Right.
And that's a great distinction that you kind of implied or infer, or I'm inferring from that.
And, and that's just it. This whole process, we may be the ones sitting in the chair, but this whole process comes down to our victims. And not just the victim themselves, but we've created victims out of their families, out of the community, everybody.
Mm.
And this hearing, even though I was looking at whether or not I was freed, it was about bringing closure to my victims. It was about letting them be part of the process and heal, or not, if that's what they chose. But, the focus is, for me at least, has been on my victim and his family and my community. And that made a lot of difference, I think, in my hearing. We did discuss things in my life. The commissioners asked direct questions on that. But I didn't dwell on that. I didn't focus on it. I answered their questions as abruptly and clearly as possible. And I was done. When it came down to my deputy commissioner asking me questions about my victim and things like that, I elaborated more because, again, it's about the victim. And so our apology letters, again, they're about our victims. They're a chance for closure. They're a chance to start healing. And that's what we want to focus on. I mean, yeah, it's great that we're part of the process, but let's keep it real. We're here for closure for our victims. That's why the victims' families and the victims are allowed to be here. So they can get their piece in, they can say whatever they need to say, get the poison out, and heal. And having this documentation, these apology letters, and them being about our victims, that gives them that opportunity. And that's what we want. If we're actually the changed people we say we are, we're not worried about whether we're going to be found suitable or not. Our actions and our lives will speak for themselves and make that decision. We're focusing on healing. And let's see, we talked earlier about the relapse prevention plan. Now, Elizabeth can tell you I did a very extensive and in-depth set of relapse prevention plans. I didn't just cover my addiction to gambling. I also covered my addiction to anger. I covered my addiction to criminality. I covered my denial, which is part of my criminality, but I covered it separately. And, I covered many different aspects of my life that if I relapse, I'm just going right back to prison.
Mm.
And I broke each one down into its own thing. I included um, internal and external triggers. I included coping skills, and I always ended up with who and where my accountability team was, including people like my parole agent, including my Gamblers Anonymous sponsors, my family, my friends, my social network, and everybody I list and that I use in my um, for my accountability partners and my support network are all proactive people. I'm not going to put in there that, well, if I feel like getting high, I'm going to go talk to my homeboy. Well, guess what? If I was thinking about getting high, that's who I would have gone to in the first place, right? So
Yeah.
when we're putting together our relapse prevention plans, we have to think about what is going to benefit us in our sobriety, whether it's drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, criminality, whatever. It's all addictives. It's either drug addiction, chemical dependence, or lifestyle addiction. It's all addiction. Take your time with it. Learn your triggers. Because, these triggers, I'm finding more and more, are so thick in daily life out here on the streets.
Mm.
So one of the
Can you give us an example?
Oh, yeah. So, well, one of the reasons I was denied for my first board hearing, besides some minimization and some other things, was I had a gambling relapse. And I was
Mm.
bored. And that's a trigger for me, is boredom. Well, it was during the COVID lockdown and I was triggered and somebody came by with a football ticket and I played it. No excuses, no nothing. I chose to play a football ticket because I was bored and I felt like doing something. Trigger. I recognized it, went to my accountability partner, and we spent hours discussing this. But now I get out here. So I'm driving down the freeway one day and I look up and there's this lottery billboard.
Mm.
And on one side, it has the super whatever, the Powerball thing at like $6.5 million. The other side of the billboard is the Mega Millions, whatever, and it's like $3.5 million. It's like, wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah, whatever. So I go to the store and one of the companies I work for, they pay us via digital card every day. So I go in to the store to take the money out of my card to take it to the bank. And the store I go to every day, right there beside the ATM machine, is a lottery ticket machine where they sell scratchers. And, it's even the best of us. And I admit it, there had been times like it'd be just so easy, just stick a, $10, $20 bill in there, get a few tickets, nobody'd ever know. But that's not true. One person's going to know, and one person that matters to me, and that's me. So, I keep reminding myself every time I have these triggers is, you know, I gave up so much in life and I stole so much from so many people and I took a man's life. To top it all off, the crowning piece of my shame was murdering a man over nothing,
Mm.
over this gambling addiction. And then when I look at that machine and it's like, yeah, no, there's nothing in that machine that's worth anything to me. I mean, there's times where I go downstairs in the house and there's a football game on and the guys down there are betting, running pools, all that stuff. It's like, you know what?
Mm.
I think I'm going to go for a walk. Extract myself from the situation. And then, I mean, I live in Los Angeles. There's so many card rooms and casinos down here. It's not funny.
Mm.
But you know what? I have healthy tools to where if I'm in the neighborhood, and as I was in Gardena one day dealing with my car issue, and I had to walk right by the Hustler Casino. You know what? I didn't even look at it. I just kept walking because it doesn't mean anything to me anymore. If I dwell on it, it becomes a trigger. And that trigger will start to fester if I don't nip it in the bud. So what do? Is I avoid it. And avoiding my triggers is one of my biggest first steps in not relapsing. And sometimes when I can't avoid them, then I rely on other tools. I keep reminding myself what was lost over my gambling. And then if that's getting to where it's not enough, I get on the phone and right then and there and I make a phone call. I mean, there's been a couple of times where I've called my parole agent and said, hey, I'm over here doing this and, I'm kind of feeling triggered. And, you're the first person I thought of because you're the first person that's going to tell me I really screwed up and violate my parole for doing so. So I want to let you know. So, I just need a little moment to talk this through with you. And he's been great. Absolutely great. And what I tell people, when you include you go to make your accountability partners and your support network, your parole agent is one of your biggest supporters. I mean, you hear horror stories about, oh, my parole agent's out to get me. No, he's not. She's not. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then you're not making them do the paperwork. You're not, making them chase you around and do all this stupid stuff. They're going to give you every resource you need to succeed. That's within their power. I mean, hell, here I am 4.5 months out of prison. And my parole agent just signed the paperwork for me to go back into 2 different prisons to facilitate. I mean, and I've been approved to go back into both. This is how much your parole agent will support you if you're doing the right thing. Make them an accountability partner. They're there for you. So that's my rant for the day.
We love your rants, Michael. They're awesome. They really tie everything together, bring the realness to the theory that, Joe with this theory, and then we bring in the parole hearing perspective. But we love the outside stuff because we don't know. We don't hear enough about that. And so those are really great examples. We're really proud of you. And what do we have in store for next week, Joe, unless you got some burning desire here?
Oh, for next week, we have the just fundamental hearing testimony. Just, people sometimes ask me, they don't know where to put their hands or whatever. I mean, these are very basic things, but hopefully they will help in your presentation.
For sure. And maybe some more stuff on the protocols of the hearing process and stuff. And we'll segue to some less dry stuff as well, probably. And I wish you both the best of the rest of your Sunday, and I look forward to seeing you both next week. And I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And it's always a pleasure to be here. I regret having to have missed a few weeks here and there, but you know what? Life happens, and sometimes it's all for the better.
It's fine. We survived, but just barely. You were missed, though. You were missed.
Yeah,
we love
you were missed.
You bring a lot of extra flavor to things that we just don't have available. We don't have that kind of perspective. So,
yeah. Well, I'm always happy to share it, and it's always a pleasure to see you guys and talk to you. And, I've missed this the past several weeks, so it's good to be back.
I've got somebody who wants to try and get these shows turned into something that could be accessible to the guys in there, because we're going right into all the topics, something that could be presented as maybe a Adobo tablet type of thing or whatever. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's still in the works.
Yeah, and they do have podcasts on the tablet separate from Adobo if need be.
Who runs those podcasts?
I'll double check, but it's through a media sample that you purchase through GTL.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but it's a group. They have NPR. They have the Poundstone Institute. They have a bunch of different things.
Oh, okay. So I would purchase the right to, or the permission to go on there or something with the shows.
Yeah, I would suggest doing some research to get in touch with the GTL distributor and find out how to do that.
Okay. When I come up for air. So I'll see you guys next week.
All right. Thank you,
Sounds
Elizabeth.
good.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Next week. Take
All
care,
right.
guys.
You too.